Okay, let's begin the theory of runes and masteries in 2016 for League of Legends. Are you guys ready? I'm ready. This is going to be fun. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Freak. I'm a decent League of Legends player, as you can see by the profile here, and I've spent a lot of time looking at runes and masteries in the game to see what are the sort of optimal choices that people take so that I can have better pages and you guys at home can have better pages. We're going to start with talking about the theory behind them, what the purpose of the runes are, what are the good runes, what are the trap runes, which ones should you really never get, which ones are awesome, which ones will send your IP on sort of the longest mileage, right? So let's start with breaking down basically what the good runes actually are. I've been playing League for a long time, so I have a lot more runes than are actually necessary. But I'm going to go down basically the runes that are actually used by current professional players for all roles. We'll go into that at the start. So we're going to start with marks. Armor marks are actually quite good. They're secondary marks, right? They're marks are normally about offense, but the flat armor value of a mark is so high, despite being secondary, that's actually quite a good mark. It's mostly just used in supports who just want extra basic tank stats and don't deal much damage. For example, Janna and Soraka don't do much damage. Leona is another good example where you don't care about how much damage you deal, you care about surviving. Also, a very few tanks in solo lanes, like a Scion, could consider just running armor marks and just not having any offensive runes at all. Armor penetration is rare, but used by some. Now, armor pen is actually used to taste. I've looked at a lot of players who are playing champions like Zed or Jace, like AD, spell-based, burst-based casters, and it's 50-50 whether they go armor pen or attack damage marks. So if you're strapped for IP, don't even bother with these. But armor pen to taste can be used on spellcaster attack damage champions, right? If all your damage comes from physical damage spells, this is a rune you could consider. Flat attack damage. This is the god rune. This rune will literally work for half of the champions in League of Legends. You buy this rune. Everyone should have 9 of this rune. Flat attack damage. If you are a physical damage dealer in any meaningful way, you're probably running this rune. Done. Moving on. This is great. Attack speed, sometimes used, much more rare. There's 2 camps where this works. There's 2 different types of champions that use this. Type number 1 is tank junglers. Like if you're jungling Nautilus or Sejuani or a Mumu, attack speed flat is the single best mark you can run to just like bump your general DPS in the jungle. If you don't have any meaningful scaling, and if you don't care that much about your actual team fight damage, attack speed marks are just good as a jungle clear speed. And to talk about jungling really briefly, clear speed, the speed at which you destroy camps in the jungle, is one of the 2 most important things you can do for yourself as a champion in the jungle. Getting through the jungle increases your gold gain, your experience gain, the health you come out of the jungle with, and how quickly you can gank people. All these things are affected by how quickly you clear the jungle camp. So even though attack speed doesn't normally make a lot of sense on a Mumu, it makes sense because you'll clear the jungle faster with a Mumu. Thus, this is a good mark. The other type of champion that cares about this are attack speed based mages, right? 9 of these will give you roughly 15% bonus attack speed, roughly, which is a lot of extra attacks. Diana cares about this. Jungle Echo, Jungle Diana care about things like this. You have to think about what kind of champion you are. A lot of professional Kayle players will run this mark. If you are not running physical damage, you might be running attack speed, if you care about your auto attacks landing. Crit chance, really, I don't think you should ever run this mark on any champion in League of Legends. A lot of players, including pros, like to run 1 crit chance mark for the chance that 1 out of 100 times when they hit an enemy champion, they crit them, and it's like going to win them the trade. I don't think this is correct. Some people do. I personally would never buy more than 1. Well, actually, I personally would never buy any, but I haven't seen anyone run more than 1 that knows what they're doing. Hybrid pen marks. This is an interesting one. These are okay. These are very particular, much like the attack speed marks earlier. We'll see some Elise jungle players run them because jungle camps have some armor, but Elise cares about her magic damage as well, and Hybrid Pen is better than a mix of armor and magic pen together. Again, it's a specialty rune. It does have some use in pro play. Mostly only junglers run them. I think no supports, well, I think generally supports shouldn't run this. The only support I think makes sense running this is Annie, as Annie will land a lot of auto attacks in lane because of her high attack range, but also cares about the magic pen and her spell damage. But it's a very particular rune, doesn't get a ton of use. Magic pen. This is the other god rune. If you could only ever buy two kinds of marks, it is flat attack damage and magic pen. Period. Those are by far the most used marks in League of Legends. If your goal is dealing magic damage, look no further. Right? If you have no other goals like clear speed because you're a jungler, or maybe auto attacks because you're a very specific type of champion, like Magic Pen is the other god rune that you just get on every magic damage dealer ever. It's easy, you buy this and you use it on almost every single mage ever. Are you playing top lane Lulu? You're running this. Are you running mid lane Karthus? You're running this. Are you running support Annie? You're probably running this. Are you running support Morgana? You're probably running this. Like, if you do magic damage, this is your rune. Moving on. Flat magic resist, don't really use that. AD per level, no. So these are runes that no one really uses, so we're going to move on. But the ones that I actually described, the ones that I hovered over, those are the runes that everyone actually uses in high level play. If I didn't mention it, you're not going to want to buy it. Those are the ones you're going to go for. Let's talk about seals that are good. There's a few that are quite good. There's a few that I have because I've played the league for so long that they're not good anymore. Via buffs or nerfs or the meta changing. Flat armor, this is one of the god runes. This is a rune that you could just pick up and it'll work for you without much effort. If you start expanding your roster of rune pages and your number of runes that you have on your account, this becomes a little bit more specialized. Again, if you're strapped for IP, just buy this and sync it everywhere in every one of your pages and you're going to be fine. Flat armor is not wrong. You can just specialize slightly better. Seals, to talk about what seals do, while marks are almost entirely about offense, plus flat armor as like a side rune, seals are entirely about defense. People only run defensive runes for seals. No one runs AP, no one runs attack damage, no one runs attack speed. A few people will run mana regen, but it is otherwise exclusively armor, armor per level, health, and health per level, and I'm probably missing like one more. But those are like the only runes you run. So flat armor is just good. It works. Armor is a solid stat to have. As you specialize more, if you're playing AD carry, you run it always. If you're running jungle, you run it 90% of the time. There's a special rune page, but you might not do that. And if you're playing in a solo lane, you're a top laner or a mid laner, you are running it if you expect your lane opponent to be a physical damage dealer. If you're against top lane Lulu and you're a top laner, you're not running flat armor seals. If you're facing Fiora, you definitely are. No one runs AD, no one runs attack speed, no one runs crit chance. Gold Generation per 10 is an underrated rune. This rune is actually better than people give it credit for. This is an underused rune. The most notable example of a player who uses this rune is the Immortals support Adrian. Has been running Gold Generation seals or sometimes Quints for a very long time now. He's a very good player. He's on what's probably the best team in North America. And he will run Gold Generation on champions like Soraka or maybe even Janna. Basically, you give up defensive stats by running this seal. But if you are never taking damage, you don't need defensive stats. Now, this does not affect many of us. In fact, every AD carry, every jungler, every solo laner will be taking damage. Theoretically, you can avoid damage as a support without hurting your impact to the game. And so if you want to be really greedy, you can run this rune. It is greedy. It is not wrong, though. So it's a very particular rune, but it can be used because Gold Generation is useful. Flat health. Exactly one class in League of Legends runs flat health seals. The way the math works out on the stats is flat health is the single best defensive rune at level 1 in League of Legends. It is the most durability you can get from a seal is flat health. However, the way the math works out, flat health falls off really fast. It falls off hard. And there's exactly one class that doesn't level up very fast and cares about level 1 stats, and that is support. Basically, every single support player should be running 9 health seals. If you can't afford the IP to buy them, then just run flat armor. But every support ever in the history of League of Legends is basically running flat health seals, unless they're being greedy with gold generation, or there's some other very particular circumstance that precludes you from running this, but you're basically always doing it. And it's only supports. No one else runs this seal. Flat health regen, not used. Magic resist, not used. Mana regen flat is used by some. Mana regen runes, I personally don't like very much. I don't find them great, but there are professional supports who will run some mana regen seals sometimes. This is probably the least likely to be run mana regen rune. You probably don't want to buy almost any of these, but I have seen them sometimes by pros. I would never have 9 of them. No one would ever have 9 of these. But I've seen it some, so there's some mana regen seals out there. Percent max health, very specialty rune, probably never going to see it. You'd have to do the math whether it's worth it for you to run this instead of scaling health. You'll probably never run this. AP per level, extremely rare. I haven't seen it in a very long time. But this used to be the common seal, was AP per level, to be very greedy on mages. Armor scaling is an occasionally used rune. So the way scaling stats works for armor specifically and for health in seals is, like flat armor is 1 armor. Scaling armor is 3 armor at level 18. At level 6, they are equal. Before level 6, it is less. Above level 6, it is more. Now, the way the math works out, 3 armor is not actually 3 times as good as 1 armor. It's actually not true, because armor has soft diminishing returns. So don't take this as like, as soon as level 6, this rune is amazing. It's like, well, no, the first 6 levels matter a lot, and so having defensive stats matters for the first few levels. And a difference of 2 armor per rune at level 18 is actually not that huge of a deal. That said, this is used sometimes in solo lanes where they want armor in their build and don't need it right away. The particulars, I'm not really sure of. This rune fights pretty heavily with health per level, and health per level is just more general and just sort of tends to work a bit better. This does get some play in high level games, pros and whatnot, but is a fairly rare rune. Health per level is another very strong one. If flat armor is the God Seal, this is the Demigod Seal. Health per level is good in many different roles, mostly just top lane and mid lane. Actually, entirely top lane and mid lane. You will occasionally see this in junglers in very specific circumstances because they can get their armor elsewhere. But health per level is, basically think of it this way. As an AD carry, I'm always running flat armor. As a support, I'm always running flat health. As a jungler, I'm probably always running flat armor. As a top laner or a mid laner, I'm either running flat armor or this. If you're not facing physical damage in your lane, you're probably just running health per level. That's kind of how that works. Health regen per level, not used. Mana per level, also not used. Mana regen per level is not used. People just tend to run the mana regen per 5 flat. I realize the scaling mana regen per level matches pretty early in. About level 6, actually. But generally speaking, if you're going to run the mana regen, you're going to run flat. But those are basically the runes. You're going to run flat armor, flat health, health per level, maybe armor per level, and maybe flat mana regen. Those are your seals. And again, the theory behind that is facing physical damage, jungling, AD carry, not facing physical damage. Okay, well, there's health per level, flat health for supports. And so the thing is, like, based on what role you play, you already know the kinds of runes to put in, right? I've talked about the offensive marks that you might run based on the champions. I've talked about the defensive seals you might run based on the champion. So you can already, like, open your client and start making the rune pages that make sense for your champions, right? If you are, and especially because of Dynamic Q now coming into League of Legends, if you are only an AD carry and support player, you only have to worry about a very specific subset of runes, right? And all you really want to do is just build the permutations out. And when we go into the video about building different rune pages and making all 20, you're going to see that we're going to do a lot of permutations on a theme. And that will be sort of, as you sort of create all of your pages, you're going to realize this is what happens. Well, let's move on to seals, okay? Seals are glyphs. Seals were always defense, and then like a couple of mana regen runes maybe sometimes. Glyphs have a lot of different categories that are good. So glyphs help spell casting, which means ability power and cooldown reduction. They help defense against spellcasting, meaning magic resist. And they also can mean mana regen. Pros will sometimes run mana regen glyphs. This is also a place where you can cut corners and run a secondary type of rune, a nerfed version of a rune that already exists somewhere else, just to be greedy for stats. There's about 6-ish kinds of glyphs that people run in high-level League of Legends. Number 1 is a flat ability power. Flat ability power is used by, well, 90% of the time by 2 roles. Flat AP is good on jungle, because again, we talked about how junglers really care about the swiftness of their clear speed, and nothing does that better than flat stats. Are you jungling a mage? Are you jungling Elise? Are you jungling Evelynn? You're almost definitely running flat ability power. Do you like playing Runic Echoes junglers? Then you're probably filling your page with flat ability power. Done. And if you're playing any conventional mage support, you're probably running flat ability power. In an earlier version of this video, I surmised that you might be running cooldown reduction on this glyph. That's really not the case. Supports are getting so much gold now in 2016 that they can get 40 CDR in their item builds without really that much difficulty. And so you're better off just getting the flat ability power stats for mage supports. This also fights with other runes in your spot, but we'll see from there. Flat armor is a very rarely but occasionally used rune. I've seen flat armor run on some supports. I've seen flat armor run on some junglers. I've seen flat armor run on some top laners. If you are so afraid of the physical damage output of your opposing champion, you might run flat armor glyphs. This is a specialty rune. It's in very particular circumstances, but potentially you might run this rune. It is rare, but it exists. Physical damage, not a chance. Attack speed. This is another rune that you might actually cut for. The only roles I see run this rune are AD carries who cut magic resist glyphs, and junglers who cut magic resist glyphs to get better clear speeds. I personally don't really like cutting MR glyphs for attack speed glyphs, but there are some pros who do it, and that is up to your taste. If you're a die-hard AD carry main, you might make some choices here. The most common rune page I see in that case is like 5 magic resist, 4 attack speed glyphs. It's to taste. I've seen some like Lee Sins and Jarvans and whatnot run attack speed glyphs as well, just to up their clear speed. Maybe. Specialty rune though, don't worry about it too much if you can't afford it. Flat cooldown reduction is a very good rune. Now here's the interesting thing. So I've looked at a lot of pros pages, and a decent number of pro junglers and supports run 6 flat cooldown reduction glyphs. The goal being they get 5% CDR from runes. Now the thing is, cooldown reduction at this point in time in League of Legends from items only comes in factors of 10. No, maybe in a future point in time there might be a way to get 5 CDR somewhere, but really that's not likely. That's really not likely to happen. Sorry, it's not that it's not likely to happen, but it doesn't exist right now. I don't think you should run only 6 CDR glyphs. I think you should either run like 9 and a quint, or none at all. Or actually you could just run 9 and just have some hanging CDR at the end, but flat CDR might be your best stat. Certain junglers might care about this. Again, it's a flat stat, so it's good right away. And if you don't scale up ability power, like you're playing Jarvan the Fourth, you might run flat CDR, so you have more spells and you might jungle faster. But by and large, this is a very rarely used glyph, and it's to taste mostly to jungle, occasionally on support. Flat Magic Pen is almost never used. I haven't seen it in quite a while. The only time I have seen it was specifically Prey, the Korean AD carry player, when playing Corki, will use Magic Pen glyphs instead of like magic resist glyphs, just to have more Magic Pen and just to do more burst. AD carry players, like the one role I see often cut defensive glyphs, is one of the roles I see often cut defensive glyphs just to eke out a little bit more power. I'm not sure if that is true, like in terms of it being the correct choice, but it is a choice I see being made quite a bit. Flat magic resist glyphs. This is one of the god runes. If you can't afford many runes, buy flat MR glyphs. Are you against magic damage in your lane? You're probably running this, which means AD carries, I think, should run 9 of these in more than half of all situations. Supports should be running 9 of these in situations where they're not running flat AP. Mid laners, if you're afraid of the enemy mid laner like it's LeBlanc, you're probably running this rune. If you're a top laner and you're playing against Lulu or Karma or something really scary, you're probably running this rune. Junglers can make a choice here. They can run flat, they can run scaling, they can run CDR, they can run AP, but some junglers will run this rune. Every single class in the game will at some point run this rune, and probably run 9 of them. This is a great rune. Again, it is, are you afraid of magic damage in your lane, or being fought with magic damage early on? If so, you run this rune. Flat mana, I've seen it occasionally, mostly just by Rise players. Even then, not everyone runs it the same way, so some run flat mana, some don't. It's up to you. I don't think it's a big deal, but some people run it, so they can do what they want. Mana Regen glyphs are run almost exclusively by AD carries and support players. I usually see between 3 and 6 of these as glyphs. I've basically never seen 9. It's up to you. I, again, don't think you need it. I think you can manage mana properly, but we're talking about very, very good players are choosing to run some of these runes, which might allow them to spam more than their opponents, which thus turns into a lane lead. That's up to taste, up to choice. There are AD carries who don't run any of these. There are some who run a lot. Talking about cutting magic glyphs a little bit, specifically Forgiven, who's a very, very good AD carry, who's from Greece, who's a European AD carry, runs 9 attack speed glyphs on every AD carry ever. He just doesn't run magic resist. He just gets the stats and says, I'm going to fight you, and doesn't care about getting poked by magic damage. So, again, everyone has their own taste. And some run none, and they run entirely magic resist. The flat mana regen is run by some in small portions. Scaling ability power glyphs. This is actually a bit more of a rare choice. You would not run this in the jungle. You would not run this support. You would not run this AD carry in any meaningful way. Top laners and mid laners might run this when they're playing mages. But this competes very heavily with scaling cooldown reduction as a glyph, so we almost never see scaling ability power. There are some situations where you might run it. You're probably not going to in many situations, but there are champions that don't scale off CDR very well. One example would be Karthus. His E and his E doesn't at all. His Q scales very little. Most of the cooldown is under the cast time. His ult, it's kind of a big deal, but you might just run scaling AP on Karthus. You might not, but that's a choice. Rumble doesn't scale off CDR very much. You might just run ability power, either flat or scaling. So there are situations where you would not run CDR, but it's more if you don't want to run CDR, then you might run scaling AP. Here's another great rune. If you are a big mage player, top lane or mid lane, you're going to run scaling cooldown reduction. In fact, this is very rare. It used to be very rare. Now it's more common. Very good jungle Nidalee players are now running scaling cooldown reduction glyphs. This is new to me. It wasn't happening 6 months ago, but it's been happening very recently. And jungle Nidalee, top level jungle Nidalee players are running scaling CDR glyphs now. Otherwise, 3/4 of the time, if you're playing a mage, Lulu, Kassadin, Morgana, mid lane, LeBlanc, whatever, you're running scaling CDR. This is the F it, pick a rune. This is the rune for mages. Scaling magic resist, very, very rare. Can be used, unlike the seals, where flat armor and scaling armor meets at level 6, and scaling health and flat health meets at level 6. Scaling MR does not meet at level 6. Scaling MR meets at like level 8. So the actual increased value of getting scaling MR is not quite as high via the late game. However, there's math that messes with this. So, do a quick math lesson. The average champion starts at about 20 armor, and 30 magic resist. So 9 armor, when you have 20, is a pretty big deal. 9 MR when you have 30 MR is not as big of a deal. And in fact, flat magic resist is worth 1.34. So like relative to the amount of stats you already had, these are a little bit more close to equal in terms of the sort of flat value and the percentage health gain via getting these runes. On the other side of the coin, though, people they start at 20 and they end at like 80 armor, which heavily diminishes the value of that 9 or even 27 flat armor you got. MR starts at 30 and either stays at 30 or goes up to 52. In which case, that, 13 you're getting from flat means a bit more, but also the scaling 27 you're getting from scaling magic resist runes means quite a lot more, right? You're going from 52 or 53 up to plus 27, which is now 80, right? This is a pretty significant bump. Again, this is a very rare rune. The math works out in interesting ways where like you are less punished by not having flat runes because you already have 30 magic resist. Ultimately, it's a rune you get where you're like afraid of magic damage, but not from your lane, and you think you're going to hit level 8 before you have to be afraid. It's really particular, it's really not a big deal, it's not that important, but if you are going to be a very greedy tank player, this is the only good scaling defensive glyph. If you're Scion and you are not afraid of your opponent at all, you just run scaling magic resist. And in fact, top laners who are not facing magic damage in lane will probably run this or maybe scaling cooldown reduction, because they will be hit by mages but not in lane, right? That's what this rune does. Scaling mana regen no one really uses either. Quintessences. Now quints are much more open. You're pretty much running a different quint based on which like type of champion you're playing. So let's go over the ones that are good, the ones that are played. Flat ability power. This is one of the god quints, right? Again, if you're strapped for IP, if you're strapped for rune pages, your rune pages should include greater quintessence of ability power. It's 5 AP from a quintessence. It's super good. Scaling AP doesn't meet it for quite a while. Like flat AP, mage jungler should run it, mage supports should run it, mages that play mid lane or top lane should run it. You should run this rune on pretty much everyone that you would consider a mage in any meaningful way. This rune is awesome. Flat armor, quite good, but quite particular. Now the interesting thing about seals versus quintessences. Seals really only give you defensive stats, and so when you're running flat armor or flat health or whatever, it makes sense just to like run defensive stats regardless of who you are. Quintessences can give you defensive stats or offensive stats. Now, as a support tank, like if you're playing Thresh, you just run armor quints because you need to be durable. If you're playing Leona, you probably run armor quints because you need to be durable. There's choices there. If you're playing a tank jungler, though, like a Mumu, you could get 13 armor by running 3 of these, or you could run 15 ability power and clear the jungle faster, which might be better. Now, the 15 AP maybe means less in a team fight because the 13 armor might mean more, but in terms of jungle efficiency, the AP means more. And so you have this really weird situation where you're like, which quint do I run? Because now you're battling offense with defense, and it's hard to equate properly. What it boils down to is this quint is used mostly by tanky supports, or supports that just need to be tanky, and some top laners who would want to run like scaling health seals, flat armor quints. Right, and that way you get a bunch of health, but you still get all that flat defense to not die in lane. It is an occasionally used rune. It's not a bad rune. It's okay. Armor pen quints, almost never used. Attack damage is almost strictly better in all situations. You're basically never going to run this rune. Physical damage. This is one of the god runes. This is if flat AP is one of the god quints, this is the other god quint. Flat AD. Is your goal to deal physical damage in League of Legends? Then you're going to run this quintessence in almost every situation. Are you playing Zed, Jace, Talon, Lee Sin? Maybe. You're probably running this rune. Now, there are caveats here. There is a rune that fights this rune very heavily. So depending on the roles you typically main, we'll talk about the alternative, which is attack speed. Attack speed is the twin brother of physical damage, Quintessences. Both of these are very, very good. If you are a physical damage dealer who relies on their auto attacks, you're probably running this rune instead. For example, Aurelia and Jax are physical damage dealers, but their attack speed is a really big deal. Lee Sin or Jarvan Jungle could be either one. I've seen pros run attack speed, I've seen pros run attack damage. Every marksman ever running attack speed. The exception being like Urgot or Teemo who have other needs. But you're basically running this on every conventional bottom lane AD carry. You're running this on a fair number of top laners and a fair number of junglers. And then it fights flat attack damage for other champions. This is also the rune you'd use for Yasuo, for example. Flat cooldown reduction. In my mind, you only would ever buy one of these, and it is to get exactly 10% cooldown reduction from your glyphs plus your quintessence. It's a very particular situation. It can be used. There is value in this. I know, for example, Alistar players have so little need for defensive runes that they could run a bunch of CDR glyphs and a CDR quint and just have 10 cooldown reduction at the start of the game. That's not wrong. It's just a choice, and you can make this choice. But you'd probably only run one to get exactly 10 CDR from your rune page. Crit chance quints, I don't think are good. I don't think you should bother. XP bonus, probably not worth it either. A few years ago, people used to run these. They're probably never going to get seen again. Gold Generation Quints. We talked about Gold Generation Seals a bit before. This is a choice you could make. But Quints, of course, are battling many more types of runes. If you were to run 3 Gold Generation Quints, you get 3 gold per 10, which is fighting against you getting 13 armor from Armor Quints. If you run Gold Generation Seals instead of Armor Seals, you're getting 2.25 gold per 10 instead of 9 armor. The numbers are pretty close to equal. I don't remember which one is actually better, like ratio-wise. But essentially, it is a tough choice to sacrifice stats for this. This you would only ever be done by supports, and only if you are ever certain that you are not getting hit, which is basically exclusively Soraka. Lemonade would also run some gold gen on champions like Karma or Morgana and play very far back, but it is rare to see this. If you really want, it'll fit some pages, but this is only ever in support. Flat Health is an outclassed rune now in League of Legends. The numbers do not stack up well. Basically, Armor Seals versus Health Seals, and then Armor Quints versus Health Quints. Armor Quints are just better. So you will basically never see this rune in League of Legends until the numbers change. Health Regen Quints are better than you might think. Health Regen Quints are quite good. In the 2015 World Championship, we saw this almost ubiquitously on tank supports by the very best support players. Tom Kench, sometimes Thresh, Leona, Alistar, these kinds of guys. This is a rune that says, I am melee and I can't lose lane. Or I'm so afraid of losing lane that I don't want to. This rune is actually insane. Now, outside of laning phase, this rune is not very strong. Right? You put in 3 of these, you get 1.5 health per second. Meh. But in laning phase, that is huge. It is huge. It is like 100 health per minute in the laning phase. That is ridiculous. If your lane is hard, and you've got to constantly play in people's faces, this might be the rune for you. Are you playing Sion or Maokai into Lulu? This lane is hard, you might run this. Are you playing Leona into Brand Ezreal? You might need to run this to not get kicked out of lane. This is good. Hybrid Pen Quints, I've never seen them in a very long time. Probably not worth your IP. There are situations where they're probably good, but these basically battle ability power Quints, which people are just more happy to use because it works with their existing pages. Lifesteal Quints we see sometimes, most notably by Yasuo players. I have a theory that these runes are better than we think. And that as an AD carry, you could run 3 of these, keep your Doran's Blade, run the Lifesteal Mastery, and then just never buy a Bloodthirster. Because then you're running into lane with 9.5% lifesteal, and then just never have to buy a Bloodthirster. And you can just buy a second crit item as your third item. In fact, I'll make a guess and say the meta might shift to Lifesteal Quints. However, this is a very bad early laning Quint for AD carries. However, it is good for Yasuo, who does have item needs and does need to stay in lane and does need to split push. It is used occasionally. It is not objectively terrible, but it is a rare usage. Flat Magic Pen Quints, basically never. I don't think I've seen it in a very long time. Again, this fights ability power Quints, and you're basically just going to run those as safer options. Flat Magic Resist Quints, I have seen them. There are some players who run these. You're basically doing a big math equation on how many defensive stats do I really need. If you're facing like Corky brand bottom lane and you're playing support, you might run this for some reason. But this is a very rare rune. All I can say is I have seen it, but it's probably not a page you're going to make. That includes these. Flat Mana Regen Quints, you might want to buy one. Again, supports run this sometimes because if you don't care about the actual power of your abilities, you might not run this. Or you might not run ability power, right? If you're just playing Morgana, or again, I bring up Alistar support as a champion that runs mana regen a lot because they don't care about their stats. They have an ultimate that makes them invincible practically. They just care about having the mana pool to do anything they could ever want always. That often includes mana regen. But I've only really ever seen one of these used at a time. Some supports run this, up to your taste. Do what you want with it. Again, I don't run this rune, but some pros do. Make the decision. And only on support. Move Speed Quints, another very rare rune. This is used on mostly Twisted Fate and Rise as champions that need to get into a pretty close range to do anything to you and have no way of getting there inside of a battle easily. Like Rise has move speed on the ulti, like TF has the ulti to teleport around the map, but generally speaking, these are types of runes that are used in specific champions, specific roles. Also, Singed runs this sometimes. I've seen ability power Quints, I've seen move speed Quints. It's up to you. But this is, again, a more rarely used rune. Present max health, it's up to you to do the math. This is not commonly used at all. You're probably never going to run this. Mana Regen Scaling Quint, probably not. Spellvamp Bonus Quint, probably not. I haven't seen this in a very long time. It is theoretically useful on someone like Vladimir or Mordekaiser or something, but we're probably not going to see this get any use. So I just happen to have it, but whatever. And that is a rundown on the runes that you should be using in League of Legends. The fact that I have so many makes it kind of weird because not all these actually get used anymore, and I could have kind of truncated this video somewhat. But that's also all the time I have for right now for today. So I'm going to end this here. I'm going to end the stream here as well. Thank you guys for watching. I will be back with more of this information at a future time, but I've got to go. So once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Y'all are wonderful people, and I will see you guys next time I'm on stream.